And then that leads to the next point here, unfortunately, is that I don't know that we have the diplomatic capacity to take him seriously. And let me just show you a couple of things here here recently that kind of illustrates that. Is first of all, just a few days ago, in terms of what the United States can do and how much influence they have over even our allies, John Kirby had this to say.
Does the United States support the goal of destroying Hamas?
We support what Israel is trying to do to protect their citizens from the threat of Hamas. And James, I think you know this, we aren't on the ground fighting in this war. There's no intent to do that. These are Israeli military operations. They get to decide what their aims and strategy are. They get to decide what their tactics are. They get to decide how they're going to go after Hamas. We're doing everything we can to support them, including providing our perspectives, including asking them hard questions about their aims and their strategy and the kind of questions we'd ask ourselves. But the question you asked me is a question better put to the Israeli Defense Forces.
So we don't have much influence even over Israel. They've hardly listened to us anything. And Biden has been really trying to get not a ceasefire because Netanyahu's disregarded that, but at least a humanitarian pause. But then you saw, I guess it was yesterday, before Blinken went to Turkey, he was in Baghdad. And when he was asked about the success of that, he said this.
President Joe Biden, when asked whether he was optimistic, he felt progress was being made towards getting Israel to agree to humanitarian pauses and strikes, he gave a thumbs up and said yes. Based on your conversations with Israel on Friday, with Arab leaders yesterday and today, do you share the president's optimism?
This is a process. Israel's raised important questions about how humanitarian pauses would work. We've got to answer those questions. We're working on exactly that. In fact, we agreed that our teams would get together, and they're doing just that, including today, to work through the specifics, the practicalities of these pauses.
And just to show you how little impact that had, here is how Netanyahu talked after he met with Blinken.
תדעו שיש דבר אחד שאנחנו לא נעשה. לא תהיה הפסקת אש בלי החזרת חטופינו. שיוציאו את זה בכלל מהלקסיקון. אנחנו אומרים את זה גם לאויבינו וגם לידידינו. ואנחנו פשוט נמשיך עד שננצח אותם. אין לנו אלטרנטיבה.
So you had Blinken there saying that his signature success was that they had a group of people to talk. And then you saw afterwards Netanyahu just say, hey, this is to our enemies and our friends. We ain't doing any of that. We're going to do whatever we feel like doing. So if we don't have influence with our allies or potentially with Turkey either, how much control do we have over how this situation evolves at all?
Two quick points. First, it was nice that the Secretary of State took off his body armor when he decided to hold this press conference. I don't know that very many Americans saw it, but he wore body armor during his visit to Baghdad. Now, we've tried to create the fiction that we achieved something positive for ourselves as well as for the Arabs in Iraq. But if the American Secretary of State is at such risk that he has to wear body armor in Baghdad, I think it puts the end to that lie. It's also a disgrace that our Secretary of State would, under any circumstances, be under that kind of threat anywhere in the world. Secondly, Mr. Biden and his administration is obedient in service to Israel. And this obedience and their unconditional support for whatever the Israelis want has led to something very dangerous. Effectively, what Biden has done, and I think really Biden is a sort of an afterthought. I think it's Blinken and Sullivan and their powerful forces behind them have essentially opened the cage door and let the tiger out. The tiger is called Netanyahu, and the tiger has determined that it must devour everyone and anyone in the neighborhood that it dislikes or considers a threat. We don't know what to do about that. And the reason we don't know what to do about it is that everyone in this government, in Washington in general, lives in fear of the Israel lobby, in fear of what could be done to them here politically if they stand up and say, well, enough's enough. There are limits to our support. There are limits to our tolerance. You know, if Richard Nixon were the president, Eisenhower were the president, I think even someone like LBJ, probably Carter, ultimately would have stood up and said, either you stop what you are doing right now, or we will withdraw our forces, i.e., we'll simply withdraw the naval power in the region. That would ultimately get Mr. Netanyahu's attention. But the Israeli influence and Mr. Netanyahu's personal power and authority at this point is so great that everyone is afraid to contradict him. And so it really doesn't matter what Mr. Blinken says in public. The truth is, Mr. Netanyahu is in control. He's not only in control of his destiny, he controls the destiny of American national power, prestige, and influence in the region.
Is there anyone that is willing to stand up and just say, hey, it's not anti-Israel to talk about taking care of American national security interest, American interest, economic interest even, or all the things you just mentioned? Do you see anybody, I don't care what party, that's willing to stand up and say, hey, look, we like Israel, but we love America, and here's what we need to do toward that end to help both?
Well, I think John Mearsheimer has tried to do just that. And of course, in many of the more extreme circles inside the Israel lobby, he's regarded as a self-loathing Jew. And frankly, you're going to be tarnished almost immediately as not just anti-Israeli per se, but as an anti-Semite. Look, this is a tough position, but I've taken the position from the very beginning that we would have to intervene to save Israel from itself. My assumption from the very beginning was that this could actually escalate to a regional conflict. I think the Israeli attitude has been, as long as we are there and our power can be leveraged on their behalf, they can simply go on with this war of annihilation against Gaza and Hamas until they're finished, and no one will interfere because we are there, at least in the background, ready to support them. That puts us in the uncomfortable position of supporting something we say we oppose. Some of you may remember that we attacked the Serbs, in my judgment, on shaky grounds, frankly, but we said that the Serbs were guilty of ethnic cleansing, of driving out the Albanians. In truth, none of the Albanians were driven out until we started to bomb. But the point is, we have always taken a position that that's unacceptable. But we've decided now this is acceptable if the Israelis do it. Now, in fairness to the Israelis, and they do deserve to hear this, when Mr. Begin and Mr. Sadat, or President Sadat, met during the Camp David Accords discussions, Menachem Begin actually offered Gaza to Anwar Sadat and said, look, we'll give it to you. You take it over. You maintain order and control. And Sadat refused, flat out, not on your life, out of the question. Well, they still reached an agreement. But the point then and the point now is the same. No one in the Muslim world wants vast numbers of Palestinians streaming into their country. Now, they have various reasons for that. They think their societies are fragile. The sudden arrival of these people could be disruptive and destabilizing. Of course, I feel the same way about my country and illegal immigration that is right now sanctioned by the administration. They don't seem to care about our borders and who comes in. But at the same time, there's something else here, and that is the fear in the Arab world that if the Palestinians simply left or were relocated at great expense, but done so peaceably, that would end the discussion about Israel's legitimacy and its long-term position in the region.
And there would be no more two-state solution. That wouldn't even be a fantasy. It would just be eliminated.
And, the Palestinians have been useful instruments in the Arab world with which to beat the Israelis over the head about this sort of thing. No one has had a solution. Now there is a solution. It's Mr. Netanyahu's solution, and his goal, and the goal of the people that support him, is to essentially cleanse the area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. This is just the first big bite. And I think in their minds, they believe that if they can succeed in Gaza, annihilate Hamas, destroy Gaza, drive out the people that live there, this will be an object lesson. And it will be much easier to induce the people on the West Bank to get out, thereby creating what they think is the biblical Israel. In other words, the pre-modern Israel. Now, that's another point of debate.
So let me ask you this, though. From a military perspective, is it even a viable military task? Well, is it a political task to give the military to say, destroy Hamas and bring peace to Israel? Can you I don't even, can you even physically kill all Hamas without killing all the people and have peace the result at the end of that?
Well, in Warsaw, in January of 1945, I think that's about right. The Nazis went in and crushed the Warsaw Uprising by the Poles. And the Poles were very stupid. All they had to do was wait for a few months, and the Soviets would have been there, and then they might have had a chance at defending themselves against the Soviets. Instead, they decided to fight the Germans, who were ultimately on the way out, and the Germans annihilated them. So do I think it could be done? Yes, the IDF could do to Gaza what was done to Warsaw. And the population there could be dramatically reduced, perhaps not entirely killed or destroyed, but certainly substantially reduced and driven out. That is attainable. The point again is, who are the key actors in all of this? What if Mr. Erdogan finally says, that's it? You know, you've crossed the Rubicon. You're over the red line. We are now going to act. We are obligated as Muslims to act against you. And in the meantime, he receives assurances from the Saudis and the Emirates, we will support you. Because remember, his economy is not especially robust. It needs support. He gets a lot of money from Qatar. If he's promised enough funding from all of the actors in the region, the key ones like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, then he can move. At the same time, he is probably going to turn around to Iran and say, are you going to join me in this? And I think if the Turks attack, the Iranians probably will. It's not because they want to, but they'll see that there's really no alternative. This is the problem from the very beginning for Israel. Israel's enemies continue to multiply. And we don't even need to talk
That's
about
actually the issue. This is not, too many people view any question about what we're doing to support Israel as being anti